All right, everybody, welcome to another podcast edition of the ThreeView Mirror, the podcast you didn't really realize you needed in your life and now can't live without. I'm joined by my two amazing co-hosts, John and Rachelle and Chris Clues, and today we're going to do what we always do. We're going to bring you three seemingly unrelated, random topics that in the end, we're going to tie together in a way that makes you say, oh my God, how did I not get that? Because it's pretty much what we've been doing every episode because we're never getting it. Today's host is none other than Chris Clues, and he's going to bring to us a couple great topics that hopefully John and Rachelle and I will get. But if past his prologue, we probably won't. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Rachelle O'Black, better known as GenX online. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, and in general, just look me up and give me a shout out.
And I'm Chris Clues, better known as Chris Clues. I am in the shadows a little bit today because this blockbuster hat that I'm wearing is relevant to our conversation today. And so it's giving me a little bit of a shadow look, which is probably better for a lot of the viewers anyway.
And I'm John Catrides, better known as GenX Jono, also found on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, pretty much anywhere and everywhere you can go to watch people doing stupid things online. I am right there front and center.
All right. So today, I'm wearing my blockbuster hat because the three segments that we're going to have today all are going to be about movies that you may have rented at a Blockbuster or your local video store in the 80s. So those three movies, and remember everybody out there, these three segments, these three things don't look like they connect, but they will connect at the end of the episode, and we'll talk about that. The three movies are Vacation, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Parenthood.
Oh my God, dude, those are like three of my favorite movies. I can't wait. I honestly can't wait to get started. I mean, I'm psyched.
I absolutely adore Vacation. I probably could quote that entire movie, the entire Christmas Vacation movie. Absolutely love it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm really excited as well because these are three movies that I really, really enjoyed. Even Parenthood, without having kids, I can appreciate the entire story. So we'll get to that one in the third segment. So I'm super excited. Now you know why the blockbuster hat. These were all movies that I'm sure you picked up in your local video store. So let's start with Vacation. An absolute classic, came out in 1983 when National Lampoon, I mean, they pushed the envelope with everything that they did. And Anthony Michael Hall got his start, really kind of got his start in Vacation. I'm sure he did some things before, but that was when we all he came on our radar, and man, did he have a run after that. A few-year run. Chevy Chase, of course, Beverly D'Angelo, Randy Quaid as Cousin Eddie, one of the all-time great characters in cinematic history. And just a fantastic movie. Imogene Coco, I should mention as well, because, Imogene Coco was this, this kind of classic Hollywood star. And when they actually cast her, she was afraid to be in a car because she'd been in a really bad accident years before with her husband. And so they had to work through that. So when you watch these scenes again with Imogene Coco and you see how anxious she is, that's a real thing. She was very anxious being in the car.
And for those who may not recognize the name, Imogene Coco played
Aunt
mother,
Bethany.
right? What's that? Aunt Bethany.
Wasn't it Aunt Bethany?
Yeah,
Aunt Bethany.
And I think it's funny because, so I guess it's a good thing that for a large part of the movie, she got to ride on top of the car.
Yeah. Before they did the funeral, where Clark says Barugata, and he does his whole
here's the question. Which is the better movie? Vacation or Christmas Vacation?
Oh, hands down, Christmas Vacation. Hands down. Listen, I could quote both of them.
I agree with you. I just feel bad saying it because there's that loyalty to OG. But it's one of the few movies where I think they got better in the second movie.
I was telling Chris before we got online here that I actually have up my Christmas trees at the moment, and hidden inside of my one Christmas tree is a squirrel, specifically for the squirrel, because literally I could bust out laughing. I know it's coming, and then when that little squirrel was on his back and he's running up and down the stairs, I laugh every time.
For me, it's the cat.
And that was the character where he said, "The blessing, the blessing." I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Well, getting back to Vacation, I think what makes that special is I was 13. You guys are, Chris, you and I are about the same age. Shell, you're a couple years
I was 13.
younger.
I was 13.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were little. And I remember, again, seeing it in the theater. I'm not sure what the rating was. I'm guaranteeing it should have been R if it wasn't. But no one blinked. And there we were sitting there laughing at all the off-color jokes, getting at least most of them. And, I mean, if I've watched that for the first time at 13 and I've watched it every year probably since, at least, that's a lot of watches. And you're like, oh, I know every line by heart. Well, I would think so. Because we've watched it so many times.
That many times.
The screenplay for Vacation was written by John Hughes. And it was called, I think, Vacation 58 or something like that. So he wrote the screenplay. He also wrote Christmas Vacation as well. Shell and I were talking about that beforehand, how prolific he was. The reason, one of the reasons I love this movie so much is that my grandmother on my dad's side was a preacher's wife. And we were at Ocean City, Maryland for the summer, and we went as a family to go watch Vacation. And she walked out. She walked out like 15 minutes in. She said, "I'm out of here. I'm not watching this garbage." And meanwhile, I'm 13 thinking, this is the greatest thing ever. I mean, this is the greatest movie of all time. And I wanted to be like Russ, 50 yards. You know, that's that whole, like, drinking the beer.
Christy Brinkley made her little, or was that Christmas Vacation? See,
no, it was Christy Brinkley in Vacation.
Oh.
Yep. No, she was in the Corvette. What kind of car? Corvette?
It was a Ferrari. Ferrari
convertible.
Yeah. Clark, slow down. And
then later the hotel scene where he's imagining her in the pool.
Oh yeah.
No, she was there.
Was she?
The imagining one was Christmas Vacation.
All right. See, the two are so, I get them confused.
Yeah, I get the little scenes confused sometimes because Christmas Vacation, he's imagining her in the pool, but in the other one, she actually was in the pool.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was the makeup counter girl. It was the makeup counter girl in the pool that he was imagining. All right.
Yes,
there we go.
That's right. Original Vacation, she was in the pool. He jumps in. He's like, "Cold, it's cold." And then all the hotel lights turn on or the motel lights turn on. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I just jumped in and this person was here."
Oh,
and she scared me.
This is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Because
adultery is funny.
This is crazy. This is
he's clapping and
he had every intention on cheating on Beverly D'Angelis. He jumps in naked to the pool with Christy Brinkley. But again, it's just funny. No consequence or repercussion. Oh my God. The 80s.
And so something interesting about the movie was that the ending was very different. Initially, they shot the ending. They did a test screening and everybody hated it. And it was that they went to
Wally World.
No, they didn't go to Wally World. They went to oh God, what is his name? Roy Wally. They went to his house because the park wasn't open and they couldn't get in. So they went to his house and forced him to like come out and entertain them in the backyard. And people hated it, so they reshot it. And that's when they brought in John Candy as the moose says you're closed and I say you're open. The moose should have told you outside. The park closed. Moose should have told you outside. Moose says you're closed. I say you're open. And off they went into the park and on the roller coaster, which, by the way, that roller coaster scene, when you see everybody's faces, it's real. They actually did a real roller coaster and they all threw up. All of them.
On a roller coaster? All of them?
Yeah.
I can't imagine why. I mean, it's just
I'm a little less impressed now.
That's the story that they all got sick. Now maybe
but to be fair, the coasters we rode as kids weren't like some kids will go on like the Mind Bender and the Intimidator and these humongous, like gigantic coasters that are smooth as ice and doing all these
True.
coasters we grew up on. Those wooden coasters beat the shit out of us,
Mm-hmm.
knocking us. It wasn't really about the drops so much. It really was about just giving us neck problems we'd carry into our 40s and back problems. And I to this day, if I see a wooden roller coaster, I'm like, no way in hell. I'll take the biggest drop on earth before I get on one of those things. They just, like I said, they were designed to beat the hell out of us.
Listen, I'm like at the coaster capital of the world here. There's like 100-year-old, I think it's 100 years old. I can't remember exactly, at Kennywood Park, which is in Pittsburgh. And they have the Racers, the Jackrabbit, and the Thunderbolt. And if you rode any one of those, yeah, you're going to have neck problems for pretty much ever. Yeah. Wait, do you remember that thing you'd spin around in and the floor would drop out?
The roundup.
The roundup, and the floor just dropped out of it.
And you're like,
the wall.
So I remember the roundup, but I keep seeing memes of this thing like the Graviton, which is kind of like a roundup, but it's enclosed. And I don't remember ever seeing that anywhere. And kids are like crawling around inside.
No, we went to Kennywood Park, and I can actually tell you where a version of that thing was at and what the building there is now. You went in and it was fully enclosed. You leaned back a little bit and the floor actually reduced down. I saw that picture online too, to the point where you clung to the walls, and that was it. It wasn't even the roundup is slightly different. It was usually out of the ground, but this thing it was in a pit. Yeah.
Crazy.
And you wait for somebody to throw up on that roundup, and then it just hit everybody.
So for those that can't see, our friend Chris is actually wearing a Del Griffith's shower curtain ring shirt with John Candy on it. And I gotta say, I love John Candy in every movie he ever made. But seeing him younger in this movie, relatively unknown, fresh off of, what was it, SCTV, that he was on, the Canadian sketch show. It's just different seeing him like that.
Oh, man. John Candy, 1994, I think we lost him, which is amazing to think that it was that long ago. Mm. And when he gets, when Clark shoots him with the BB gun, he's like, stop. It was a BB gun. That whole, for me, that, just the presence of John Candy in that movie made it, even though the movie's incredible. When you go back now, when you watch in the theater, a lot of us, unless we knew SCTV, and at 13, I didn't either. We didn't know who John Candy was, but now we do. And I appreciate that little scene so much more because of that. So, I just, and the reason I'm wearing the Del Griffith shirt, for those of you that are watching, and then those of you who are listening, I am wearing the Del Griffith shower curtain ring shirt, is because this is our Thanksgiving episode. And so, of course, Thanksgiving movie, wanted to make sure that I was repping Thanksgiving for a Thanksgiving episode.
So how many vacation movies were there? There was Vacation, Christmas Vacation, European Vacation,
Vegas Vacation.
Vegas Vacation.
I've never seen Vegas.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Never saw that one. Rachelle,
I liked it.
It's unimpressed.
I was most unimpressed with European Vacation.
Yes.
If I was going to rank them, I would say Christmas, then regular Vacation, then Vegas, then European. I was
Agreed.
With that one.
And that was it? Those
Agreed.
four?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so.
It was. I think the Rusty got the fake ID, and Vegas Vacation. His name was like Mr. Papa Giorgio.
Papa Giorgio. Yes. Yeah, right? Yes. Papa Giorgio. That's right. Yeah.
And for our great followers out there, of course, the name should have been Papa Yorgo. It's not as fun.
Okay. All right. So, that's right. And it would have probably taken a lot of takes to get that right. So, John and I talked about, we were 13 when that movie came out. And Anthony Michael Hall, I think, was 14. And one of the things that happened during the shooting of Vacation is he grew 3 inches. So if you go back and you watch the movie, you can kind of see it. Cool. He was in puberty and he grew 3 inches during the film.
Huh.
Yeah. And I wanted to point out 2 more quick things from Vacation. One is that Beverly D'Angelo actually, when she was singing in the shower, she's a very good singer. In fact, she was one of the main cast members for Hair. So that was nothing new to her to be able to sing. And the dog scene, where the dog is tied up behind the car.
Oh, when the police officer, he comes over, what does he say? He's like, you sick.
Yeah,
Yes.
I should tie you to the back of the bumper.
Yeah.
The poor guy hung on for the first few miles.
That's
Not funny. Funny.
Yeah, it's like
the animal rights guy's laughing. Wrong.
oh man. Well, because it's not real, so I can laugh. James Keach was the police officer, and Chevy Chase. That entire scene was improvised. They just let them go with it.
That's the
and
best.
when they were filming, they were staying at a hotel, and there actually was a dog tied to a car, and the car almost took off. And Harold Ramis, who was the director, I believe, he and a couple of the crew members stopped the guy. He couldn't believe that he had done it, the guy who was driving. But it doesn't say if that's where the scene came from, but it happened while they were filming the movie.
Wow.
I need to go back and watch the making of for some of my older favorite movies, because I've never seen some of that stuff, and I think it would be absolutely fascinating to go back and look at 16 Candles maybe behind the scenes, or Vacation and Christmas Vacation. I would love that.
Okay, so we've talked about Vacation and how great of a movie it is, and how much comedic talent was in that movie across the board, and that we got introduced to Christy Brinkley, and we got introduced to a lot of people, not everybody, to John Candy and Anthony Michael Hall. Most people knew Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo at that time. So a lot of great introductions in Vacation. So now we're going to move to the next one, and we're going to go chronological order here. So the next movie that we're going to talk about is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And again, an absolute classic. Just like I would argue that it's even more timeless than Ferris Bueller than Vacation in a lot of ways. That it's generational. That even today, there are kids who aspire to be Ferris Bueller.
Sure.
Because he was so very cool. And I know that I was. Hopefully, kids aspire to be Ferris Bueller, not Cameron. That's the goal, of course. That Cameron was in Egypt's land. Let my Cameron go. At the beginning of the movie.
The first thing I think of is just bada 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 swing bada. And
that was Cameron. Yeah,
Cameron was doing it.
And let's not forget about Sloane too, because Sloane, who was played by Mia Sara, who was also in the movie Legend, which is a great underrated movie. If you've never watched Legend and you like fantasy movies and you like Tom Cruise, watch Legend. Yeah, so Ferris Bueller, just, iconic, in so many iconic scenes. I think almost a perfect movie from beginning to end. There's a lot of great movies that I really enjoy watching over and over again, but there'll be 10 or 15 minutes where I'm just kind of like, did they need this? Is this where? I never feel like that in Ferris Bueller. The entire movie just feels like it works from the very second that he comes on screen. And it's so iconic that it continues to get cultural references. You had, the Mia Sara jacket, or Sloane's jacket in this new movie, Totally Killer. Deadpool, if you ever saw Deadpool. Now, what's interesting about Ferris, and somebody could fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure that Ferris was the first movie to have a scene after the credits, where if you waited until the very end, which is very popular to do now, especially with the Marvel and superhero movies, and he comes out and he looks and he's in the robe and he's like, "You're still here?
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
Go home. Go."
Yes.
Deadpool did the exact same thing.
I think we all wanted to be Ferris Bueller, though, when we were kids. We wanted to have that A, popularity, B, I could get away with anything, and people will still love me. We all wanted to be Ferris.
There wasn't much cool about me in the early years of high school, but I will say by about my junior year, if there was anything even remotely Ferris about me, it's the fact that I could pretty much get away with murder at school. I broke every rule there was. And if there were 4 or 5 of us that did something, I'd be sitting there in class and I'd hear my 4 friends' names called down to the office and mine would be omitted. And it got to the point where my friends blew me in. They got so sick of it. They're like, Catrides was there too. And the friends were like, no, he wasn't. Nope, didn't happen. And I don't know if it's because I was just a good kid or the teachers knew my parents would literally kill me and didn't think that death was would fit the punishment.
And I think the third option might have been they felt sorry for you with those Coke bottle glasses.
I had contacts by then. Thank you very much.
And of course, like you had the solo in the choir for "Wind Beneath My Wings," and that made everybody.
Thank you for bringing it up. I was wondering if you all are playing a drinking game. Go ahead and take your shot. Chris just mentioned "Wind Beneath My Wings." That's a twofer. Take 2 shots.
Bored. We're gonna board. Like at what minute? We have people that take bets on this.
It is 27 minutes and 8 seconds into our podcast. Bette Midler, take a shot. Okay, so we're throwing back to other episodes. I had to mention it. Rachelle, I don't know if you saw it, but in the comment section of one of our past podcasts, somebody mentioned that they had the alien letter.
No, they didn't.
They did. I'm like, Rachelle will feel so validated. They said there were even portions of it that gave you instructions. Rub the T in the letter, touch this part of the letter, and at the end it says you've just gotten intimate with an alien.
I'm not insane.
The fever dream was real.
The world out there is going to know I'm not insane.
Well, let's not get carried away.
So two of you knew about the alien letter.
Still be true.
Yeah, that's right.
I tried to even look it up online, and of course then I got a whole bunch of garbage because I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm going to find this and I'm going to prove to them that Ferris, this was for real.
I will say I did a deep dive into the comment. I Googled the poster because I wanted to make sure it wasn't you under a different name because I wouldn't put that past you.
Me just trying to prove you wrong.
That would be amazing.
I will say, getting back to Ferris Bueller, one thing I get all the time, probably I know Breakfast Club is like hallowed ground for us Xers, but if not better than, then for me, Ferris Bueller was equal to. It had a lot of the same components, a great cast that worked really well together. I love the fact that the movie moved from scene to scene and had just almost like MTV style montage shots that moved them into the museum. And then you had the restaurant scene. So it just to your point, Chris, it kept us interested all the way through. So I love this movie. So I post about it a lot. And I will speak to the fact that Ferris Bueller was a Gen Xer based on when the movie came out and the fact that he was in high school. But Matthew Broderick wasn't. And sometimes that confuses people because Matthew Broderick, the actor, is in fact a boomer. But he was playing an Xer. So whenever I talk about Ferris being a Generation Xer, I always get pushback from our older brothers and sisters saying, no, he was a boomer. But to any and everyone listening, Ferris was Gen X.
Yes, he embodied what we were about completely. And one of my favorite scenes of the entire movie is the Donkashane parade scene.
Me too.
I just absolutely love that. And to take over a whole city like that and nobody knows that he's playing hooky,
Cameron Fry, this one's for you. Yeah, that scene's awesome. And I'll tell you, the other scenes that I love are when they're pranking Principal Rooney, Ed Rooney, and, of course, Grace, his secretary or assistant, who is just fantastic because she calls him out and everything, but she also has some great lines because Edie McClurg was awesome, and she took a character and even that little bit of time on screen, she would steal it. And when she says to him, when Ed says, I don't trust this kid any further than I can throw him, she says, well, with your bad knee, Ed, you shouldn't throw anybody. It's true.
My favorite scene of her, and again, talk about a small scene and stealing it, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. When Steve Martin comes in the car rental, and she's sitting there and she's taking it and she's taking it and she's taking it, and finally she's done. And she's like, well, then you're fucked.
We were just talking about this before the episode started, and I said, I haven't seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in so many years, but that scene always pops up, the rant that Steve Martin does at the end of it. And I was going to talk about her there, and way to go.
Yeah, she steals the Ferris Bueller scenes with Principal Rooney, and where he's like, he says, I wrote this down because some of these are so funny, but I just remember them. But when he says, that's why I got to catch him this time to show these kids the example he sets is a first class ticket to nowhere. And Grace is like, oh, Ed, you sounded like Dirty Harry just now.
Do you know? I'm pretty sure the three of us are older than Principal Rooney right now.
Oh no!
Oh, look at the smiles.
100%.
Look at the smiles fade.
100%. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's not forget that Jennifer Grey was also in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
She was the sister. Yeah.
And we had a cameo from someone else too.
Charlie Sheen.
Oh.
All right, Charlie Sheen.
Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen.
Charlie Sheen.
Yep. Yeah, so there was a lot going on in the movie beyond just the, you know, the main characters in terms, again, when we think about the 80s and all of these people that we were introduced to that had these very small roles, and we were fortunate enough to actually see them get their start and then watch them just, you know, become stars. And little did they know at the time, this little role, boom, I'm a star. You know, it's pretty awesome when you go back and watch that. No, they didn't know yet. They had no idea, but it was coming.
I'm not sure if Charlie Sheen did anything before that.
You know, I mean, that's a good question, actually. I think Lucas came out before that. I think Lucas came out before Ferris Bueller, and he had a pretty significant role in Lucas.
What about the baseball movie? When was that?
Lucas?
No, the baseball movie.
Oh,
8 Men Out. That was 89, I think. Oh,
no,
Major League.
Men Out. No, Major
League.
League. She's thinking Major League, but I think probably 87,
Major League.
88 for Major League.
88 or 89, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it was, you know, I'm sure there's a story behind, I probably should have researched about how Charlie Sheen ended up in that really tiny role because, you know, after all, like with Emilio Estevez, his brother had already been in The Outsiders and a couple of other movies as well. And the soundtrack, you know, John Hughes was famous for his soundtracks.
I was going to say they would do that though, like John, even like in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Kevin Bacon took that really small role in the very beginning where he's going for the car because they loved working with John Hughes and Chris Columbus and those directors were so great that big actors would take small roles just to work with them.
Yeah. So with Ferris and Sloane, one thing that people don't talk about is how selfless they were. We think about Ferris in the context of like all the cool things that he did. But the reality is, from the moment that we see Cameron, he's as miserable and pessimistic as Sloane and Ferris are positive and optimistic. And even Ferris says, you know, if we don't do something for Cameron before he goes to college, his roommate's going to kill him. Like, so he's so stressed out and so wound up. And we find out at the end of the movie that it's because of the relationship with his father. I would have loved to see like a little short years later about what happened.
If I put my dad's car out through the windows / whatever that was and landed in the forest, I'm not sure that relationship did end very well.
It didn't sound like it was very good to begin with. And so I've always been curious about that. But they were very selfless because remember, they took all this time to plan this day off. They hatched this incredible scheme, take this time to plan it. And what do? Ferris will not take no for an answer from Cameron. He says, you're coming with us. They knew full well that Cameron could ruin this day for them. But it wasn't about them. Ultimately, in my opinion, the movie was about Cameron. And the movie was about doing a selfless act for your friends and others because that day off was a valuable day off for both of them. And they took a chance on ruining it by inviting Cameron because they knew that he needed it more than they did. And that's what I saw in the movie as an adult. When I took a step back and I watched it again, and I wasn't wanting to be Ferris at 50, although I don't mind. I could be Ferris at 53, I suppose. But I looked back, and maybe I am a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I do have a little Ferris in me. But I look back now, and hopefully a little Lloyd Dobler too. And I look back now, and I say, you know, that was a selfless act that they did for him.
I never really thought about it that way. When I look at these movies, you know, there was always a lesson to be learned in pretty much any movie that we watched. It was some sort of a coming of age, and, you know, all the John Hughes movies seemed to be, you know, there was some sort of a lesson behind it. And I never looked back on that movie and saw it that way, but I could see it, you know, now that you say it.
The other thing is for a lot of these movies, again, look at Breakfast Club. You could take each individual character and they had their own movie. There was enough attention placed on every character that you could almost rework the movie and show it from everybody's perspective. And although it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they could have probably made 4 or 5 other movies showing the perspective from his sister definitely had a day. You know, if we saw it from her point of view, she could still have filled an hour and a half full of movies. Because Jennifer Grey's character goes through this entire progression in the movie where it's all she can do to catch her brother. And in the end, she saves him. So she had her perspective. Rooney It could have been Rooney's day off because you could have followed him. And I mean, that's what's awesome about it is I think subconsciously, unconsciously, while we're watching one movie, our brain is entertained by thinking about these other subplots that are going on. And so many of these movies did that back then. And it's not just what you're seeing, it's also what you're not seeing that's really important. Does that make sense?
You know, no, that absolutely makes sense, because that's one of my problems sometimes today with movies and TV is they are somewhat flat. They don't have that depth to them and that backstory, side story, you know, and there's times when you're spoon feeding it to me. And if you're not spoon feeding it to me, then what you're doing is making me have to like, what in the hell did I just watch? And I'm having to Google the ending of it because it's just, it isn't simple enough then, you know? So yeah, I like the characters in the older movies.
Yeah, and you know, Jennifer, I mean, obviously his sister is amazing because, you know, that one scene where she says, whoever's in my house, I have a gun and a scratching case of herpes. And so as we move on, oh, go ahead.
Before we
John.
move on, there's one thing when Shell mentioned the parade scene. These movies had an impact on us as young kids because we saw things like that happening. We saw Tom Cruise and Maverick and Goose singing in the bar. We saw people on screen stepping outside of themselves, not being embarrassed to be outlandish in the name of fun. And I think it impacted us because I did it back then, and I continue to do things like that today. And I wonder if it's because I saw things. Granted, no one's let me take over a parade, but we'll be sitting in Target, and that song will come on, and I'll embarrass the hell out of my kids, not caring who's watching. And then if there are people watching that are of our age, they don't look at us, you know, with this look of disdain on their face. They either join in or laugh. These movies really did teach us to have safe, harmless, outlandish fun. And I think when I was doing it, I was mimicking what I saw. And I'm glad. It really changed what I knew to be allowable in life in the name of fun.
And all the movies, and to add to that point too, the iconicness, if that's a word there, of these movies. We would sing Donkashane, like we were pretending like we were up on, you know, the band members, you know, we were going back and forth with the trumpets or whatever, you know. I was in the band too, John, so, you know, just FYI, you know. But there were a lot of references that we made back in the day, whether it would be singing a song or mimicking something. Even the dance with Clark when he had the pea sandwich, you know, his little dance that he does. We did that. We did these things when we were younger. And I don't know that there's any movies today where they're that iconic that people are copying and saying the words of the TV shows or movies that we did back in the day.
We always talk about how to bring things from the past into the present. And I mean, this is one that I think we do all the time. I've seen so many people comment that they sing out loud in the grocery store when our songs are playing. And I just want to remind people, as we enter our 40s and 50s, don't stop having fun. Don't turn into Rooney. Stay Ferris. Because I think that's a trait that we all can share. That's my call out to everyone listening. Don't turn into Rooney. We may be older than him. We may be older than the principal in the Breakfast Club now, but we can still be Bender. So don't let it go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, as we close here on Ferris Bueller, I wanted to point out one more thing that we always talk about with Gen X and how we had all these different groups, but everybody got along and was really, really interesting. If you think about back to, you know, of course there were disagreements in high school. We all had them. Like, we can't gloss over the fact that we didn't have issues in our high schools. However, what was really cool was we had all these different groups, but ultimately, like, when there were disagreements, it typically wasn't between two groups. It was usually between two individuals. It's kind of the point that I'm making, which is why we are who we are today as Gen X. And so there's this great line by Grace when she's talking about Ferris Bueller to Rooney, and she says, oh, he's very popular, Ed. The Sportos, the Motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude. I think that's perfect, right, about Gen X. Yeah, so Ferris, classic, iconic, great characters, amazing dialogue, fun, just a fun movie that I think one of those movies decades from now, people will still watch. They're still going to share. Kids today are going to share it with their kids because it's been shared with them, and it's just a classic. And that third movie is Parenthood. Now, Parenthood isn't talked about in the same way that Vacation and Ferris Bueller are when we think about 80s movies, but it should be for a number of reasons. Now, for those of you that don't remember Parenthood, it came out in 1989. It was directed by Opie, Ron Howard, who has had just an incredible career. I mean, you think about what he's done from Opie to Opie and Andy Griffith to oh my God, I'm drawing a blank in Happy Days.
Richie Cunningham
and Happy Days to being this prolific award-winning director. And Parenthood was one of his. It's about the four Buckman. Buckman was the last name of the family. The four Buckman siblings attempting to raise their children, each in their own different style. Yes, I wrote this down just so I could give a little plot synopsis here and deal with the joys and sorrows that the process brings. So it's really all about family, raising your kids, something, again, I haven't done, you two have, so you'll be able to relate to a lot of the situations a little better. But I enjoyed the movie because of the incredible cast, and it's a phenomenal story, and it's very funny, and it's happy, and it's sad, and it's emotional. It takes you on a roller coaster, just like the grandmother says at the end, that life is about, the roller coaster, and you need to kind of ride it. It's going to have its ups and downs. And so I want to talk quickly about the cast before we jump in. I'm going to let you guys talk here, because the cast is amazing. Okay, so we have still Steve Martin, who's the Gil Buckman. He's the father. You have Keanu Reeves. John mentioned that when we were talking off camera earlier. Keanu Reeves. You had Joaquin Phoenix in it as well, whose name was actually Leaf. He named himself Leaf because his siblings had River and Summer, and he wanted to be like them. So Leaf Phoenix, but then referred back to Joaquin. He played the really kind of introverted kid that had a bad childhood from his dad, and I think his name was Gary, who actually is played by Leonardo DiCaprio in the TV show that didn't last very long back in the 80s and had a reboot in the 2000s. You had Rick Moranis, another 80s tie, who was the key master from Ghostbusters. If that wasn't like
Horrors too.
If that wasn't like,
Honey,
what's the word I'm looking for?
Kids.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, Little Giants, right? He was in Little Giants. But yeah, the keymaster and the gatekeeper, if that's not like what's the word I'm looking for? Innuendo. The gatekeeper, keymaster and the gatekeeper in Ghostbusters.
There's a finger motion for that. There's just a word of
little bit of innuendo there in Ghostbusters. And John had never thought about it that way, but now you did.
There's
a finger motion?
I didn't know about that. That's like the alien thing.
Now everyone's running to YouTube. Anyone on Spotify or iHeart, oh my God, she did it.
Yeah.
Our YouTube numbers just went up.
We're always going to end up here at some point. Okay, this is board number 2, besides Wind Beneath My Wings. This is board number 2. When does Chris end up being the adult in the room?
So
Diane Wiest, who also was the mom in The Lost Boys, amongst others. I mean, she's a tremendous actress. Mary Steenburgen, who I loved in Elf and Step Brothers as the mom. Martha Plimpton, who was in The Goonies, the poster behind John there. Tom Hulce. Now, Tom Hulce may not be a familiar name, but he was nominated for the Academy Award as Amadeus in the 1985 movie.
That is one of my, I have top 5 movies. That is one of my top 5 movies of all time from the 80s. That's another one of those movies that I could just quote the entire thing. And it started me with a little love of classical music. I forgot about that.
Never seen
Rock Me Amadeus. Falco.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah.
Jason Robards. Now, he was older at the time. He played the grandfather. But he has one of my favorite lines when he gets asked about parenting, and he's talking to his son, who's kind of a screw up, which is a Tom Hulce character. And he's like, Gil, I know, he's talking to Steve Martin, actually. And he says, that parenting is like your Aunt Edna's ass. It goes on forever, and it's just as frightening. Now, this is a name you're not going to know, but you are going to know her sons. Eileen Ryan. Now, you may not know her name, but she is the mother of Sean Penn, Michael Penn, and Chris Penn.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, but finally, and this is the reason I think this cast is incredible in so many different ways. Howie Duro. Now, there may be some younger people out there who are listening who know this name because he played the uncredited as a stunned summer school student. And this was before his career took off as a Backstreet Boy. He's Howie from the Backstreet Boys.
Huh.
Howie from the Backstreet Boys. He was an uncredited stunned summer school student before his career took off as a Backstreet Boy.
Huh.
Pretty cool.
You
Pretty cool, right?
Now I just have to take a little pause here and say, like, you're so thorough, and you just amaze all of us with, we all have a collective knowledge here, but then you just amaze me sometimes with how much you just know about all of this stuff.
He doesn't know it. He does the research. He looked this up. You're giving him way too... He doesn't have kids to chase. Of course he can stuff his face in a card catalog for 3 hours a day.
That's right. I can. Yeah, the microfiche. Yeah.
When I do my 3 topics...
Well, I appreciate that,
I think this person was in there. No, Chris, by far, your 3 topics are always the best researched. Mine are the most on the fly, and Rachelle's leave us scratching our head the most often. It's like, what?
Yeah. I would say that's pretty. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah, I'm constantly doing this with shells.
Like, what?
Anyway, Parenthood. Now, both of you are parents, and so you've been through the ups and downs, the craziness, the awesome roller coaster. I'm sure that it is. And Parenthood captured it so very well. Even for those of us who don't have kids, it captured it so well. And I watched it recently because I really forgot how great that movie is, and how, again, from beginning to end, there doesn't seem to be a point where you say, you can throw this 10 minutes out. Not at all. It's just an incredible story.
It's been a long time since I've seen it. Like, what's that? Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to remember it. And then the problem is you get to a certain age and memories like bleed together. You mentioned the reboot in the 2000s. So Craig T. Nelson and that Parenthood is kind of bleeding in. Steve Martin has done so many movies where like he's the dad. So the one where they have all the kids is bleeding into it. I'm just having a hard time separating which was this movie and which were the other movies they were in.
Yeah, and so do you remember by chance the one with where he's going to hire the clown for the birthday party, and his son is a very anxious kid. He's got I don't know how you would classify him today. We may have said he might have been a little autistic, but back then they would have said he was just maybe anxious. Mm-hmm. And he tries to hire the clown, and the clown, he can't get the clown that the kid wants, and he gets upset and he cries and runs from his birthday party. And then Steve Martin ends up dressing up as the clown, and it's even better than the original clown. And it's like this really nice like scene where he's struggling with trying to understand his one son, where his other son is 3 years old, and he puts a bucket on his head and hits his head against the wall, and he eats stickers, and like typical little 3-year-old kid.
I need you to recap this more, because as soon as you start saying those things, I recall what you're saying. But if you were to ask me to pick a scene from that movie and tell you about it, I'd never be able to. But as soon as you start saying things like bucket on the head or the clown, then I start to recall flashes of it.
But the reason that I loved Parenthood and I watched it when it came out in the theaters, because I was a huge Steve Martin fan from Two Wild and Crazy Guys back on Saturday Night Live. I mean, I just, I think he was one of the first comedians that, because a lot of the stuff that he did, like I mean, my favorite comedian when I got to an age where I could appreciate all comedy was Eddie Murphy. But when I couldn't appreciate that comedy, it was Steve Martin, because a lot of the stuff that he did, like King Tut and Wild and Crazy Guys, it was, you could watch it as a 10-year-old and be fine with it. And so I really had an appreciation for him, which is why, the movie jumped out to me as a 19-year-old. And Ron Howard, I always like the origin stories, and I did do my research here. This is not something I'm pulling out of my brain on this one. I always love the origin stories behind some of these and how they came to be. It was actually Ron Howard said that he was on a flight, and he had just come off of like Night Shift and Splash and Cocoon. He was a lot of success. And his daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, who is a very good actress in her own right now, he had his 4-year-old daughter. She was 4 years old, 7-month-old twins, and it was a 17-hour flight. And they were going to film the movie Gung Ho, if you remember that one. And he said they needed diapers, formula, all the stuff we needed with us. We were only allowed 2 carry-on items. He had 24. So he had the crew carrying different stuff. And then he said that Bryce, at 4 years old, she was brave enough to try some vegetarian sushi, and she projectile vomited all over him. And he had no change of shirt. And the babies are crying. I'm just reading what he said. The babies are crying. I'm helping Cheryl. We're just walking them and driving the crew crazy. Miss Howard was pulling their pile of luggage in the baggage carousel upon arrival, sweating, feeling like an old man at 32, cursing the heavens. He realized he had a comedy on his hands. Mm. And if that really describes Parenthood, the movie, and I'm sure Parenthood in real life, just the chaos and trying to keep it all under control, but then looking back and saying, what a story I have.
Listen, I can speak to this on having 6 children, obviously. That you could make 2 separate movies out of your life, one of them being an absolute comedic thing. And they've made plenty of movies like that. But on the other half, there could also be like a horror flick made at the same time. So it's like horror comedy. It shouldn't go together, but it does, and it makes you feel good at the end of it. So if I had to describe parenting, it's like a horror comedy. It makes you go, I can't believe that happened. That is horrible, but I have to at least laugh about it because there's nothing else I could do.
The other thing that you mentioned, Steve Martin, and to Shell's point, we saw him become like, so when to both of you, Chris, you mentioned King Tut, you mentioned Wild and Crazy Guy. When we were real little, he was just this comedian who told jokes, sometimes off color. And then we saw him, like Shell said, in my 30s, I got married and became a parent. He graduated in his roles and became father of the bride and did Parenthood and did a Cheaper by the Dozen. So he became America's dad in all these movies, kind of leading the way as we then, after the fact, progressed into that role. So he was always one step ahead of us. So in the 80s, when we were kids, he was a young adult having a great time. In the 90s, when we were young adults having a great time, he became America's dad in these movies. And then today, he's the grandfather in the room. He's doing with Martin Short and
Murders in the Building or something.
Yeah, and it's awesome. It's really good. But him and Martin Short are like the old men in the show. And although I choose not to follow, I hope I don't become that. If I do become that old man, if I'm fortunate enough, blessed enough, I hope I do it like he's doing it. And it's just, I know that's not related, but that's how I see Steve Martin. He's always seemed to lead the way for our generation in how to do that next stage in life that's coming for us and do it while having a lot of fun.
And like you said about bringing things into today, embracing his age and who he is at every singular stage in his life, because you have to embrace your age, because we're all marching down this same street. And, and anybody that wants to say anything about someone being old, well, it's a privilege to be old, because that means you've made it this far. Yeah. And, to put a nice philosophical point to it, because we talked about the philosophies of Ferris Bueller, but that's a great philosophy just here.
Yeah, I often refer to Ferris Bueller as the 80s pop culture poet laureate, because he had so many great lines like life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you can miss it. I mean, he had just tons of them. But yeah, I mean, that's and that's life, as Frank Sinatra sang, and then David Lee Roth, the one I know better, did. It really is a journey. And, John, to your point too about getting older, and I'm a pretty competitive person. So when I turned 50, I'm like, okay, so I've come out of the locker room, to use a football analogy, and I'm kicking off the second half. I had to make the halftime adjustments. I've made my halftime adjustments, kicking off the second half. Now it's a competition. I'm getting that ball further down the field than everybody else is. And that's my goal, is like, I want to get to the other end zone. And I'm going to stiff arm people on the way. No, I'm just kidding. I won't do that. But no, it's a journey. And so the grandmother in Parenthood, I just wanted to read the little scene because I think this will really, I hope it'll hit home with both of you and anybody in the audience who is a parent, unlike me. but it still hits home for me because even without kids, I can feel this dialogue that she had with Gil, Steve Martin. So here's the scene. It's the grandma, and the grandma says, you know, when I was 19, Grandpa took me on a roller coaster. And Gil says, oh? And Grandma says, yeah, up, down, oh, what a ride. And he just looks at her, he's like, what a great story. And she says, I always wanted to go again. You know, it was just so interesting to me that a ride could make me so frightened, so scared, so sick, so excited, and so thrilled all together. Some didn't like it. They went on the merry-go-round. That just goes around. Nothing. I like the roller coaster. You get more out of it. And it's like such a perfect, I don't know, for me, like that's really what life is supposed to be about. And I talk about that a lot. How if you were born at point A and point B is a straight line, it feels boring to me. Like the great thing about life, it is the peaks and the valleys. And, you know.
The time. I don't want to ride the tram. I really don't care about the tram. I'll take the ups and downs.
Sometimes I'm just begging for that crazy. Yeah. Just, you know, what's that old Chinese proverb that it's a curse? I hope you live in interesting times. It's supposed to be like an ancient Chinese curse. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I could take a little boring, but the truth of the matter is you're both 1,000% right. It's just, I don't think any of us ever expected when we were younger, just how steep these hills and valleys can be. It's a lot sometimes. That's why I look forward to this hour, and I hope, and I really, really hope that people listening or watching just enjoy this break. Take a minute, take some time to look back, to see how it felt, to see things under a different perspective, a three-view mirror of the things that we enjoyed. Take a minute, take an hour, take a break, laugh, make fun of it, whatever, and then move on with your day. This point of the week is really turning into something awesome for me. And I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate it. And Chris, you keep saying you don't have kids, but if this keeps going, I pray that my kids will have an Uncle Chris they can count on at some point.
Oh, well,
because
thanks.
I think it'd be a hell of a lot of fun for kids to be around.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I do. Yeah, for sure. I'm a godfather. My buddy Gabe, I'm the godfather to one of his daughters. And when she was getting christened, she's just a little baby, and he said, "Here, you can, hold Presley." And I'm like, "Nah, it's okay." And he's like, "Dude, hold my daughter." And I'm like, "No, I don't." He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I've never held a baby before. I'm afraid she's gonna break. Like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't hold her." And he said, he's like, "Come on, dude, you got to hold my baby, hold my daughter." I'm like, "No." So to this day, he has not let me live that down. She's 11 or 12 now, and every Thanksgiving when I'm over there, I get reminded that I didn't do the godfatherly thing.
So, be thankful. Like in my faith, Greek Orthodox, we do the full dunking at baptisms. So we will take the baby, cover the baby, slather the baby in anointed oil from head to toe, and then dunk them 3 times full submersion in the baptismal font, and then hand them to the godfather or godmother. And I can't tell you how many times that kid almost gets dropped because it's slimy, it's oily, it's like a contest. If the kid doesn't hit the floor and break, then you're a good godparent. Congratulations.
Oh.
Nobody in the audience listening can see my eyes just as soon as you say oiled and slippery and dunked. I'm thinking to myself, oh my.
Yeah.
Oh.
Nope.
Yep, that's the way it is. Way. He's going to do the reveal. I'm like, every time, I'm like, oh, he played that roller. First of all, very quickly, when you started with the roller coaster quote that I've never heard, when the grandmother said your grandfather took me for a ride up and down, I thought you were going somewhere else entirely with that. Especially when she said she enjoyed it and wanted to go again.
Of course she did, yeah.
The hand gesture comes again.
And then I'm like, and there was a roller coaster in Vacation. So then I'm like trying to figure the roller coaster in Ferris Bueller, but there isn't one.
So let's recap real quick for everybody out there. We had three things that we talked about today that all intersect. They all connect in some way. Vacation, the movie Vacation, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Parenthood. How do they connect?
One of the things that I was thinking of was iconic cameos of people, especially maybe before they were huge stars. So working alongside some of the big hitters in the industry, some of those, like Backstreet Boy or Leo DiCaprio, I would think that would have been early on in his career as well. that was one of the directions that I was headed. I had another one, and I think I lost it.
That could work. John Candy, Charlie Sheen, Joaquin / Leaf Phoenix. Was he credited as Leaf?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yep. Yeah.
Did Ron Howard put his brother in Parenthood? Because he's like in almost every one of his movies.
He's in all of his movies. He's in all of it. Yes, he's in there. And so is his daughter, Bryce, when she was 4.
Every single movie, Ron Howard has made a career for his brother. Nepotism,
yeah, he has.
Finest. So I think that's really, really good, Shell.
I had another one. I lost it.
Who directed? It's not the directors. That's not it.
Steve Martin, and my other one I was thinking of was related to your shirt there, and this being sort of a Thanksgiving episode thing, was the connection to each one of these had some small connection to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, whether it be Steve Martin in Parenthood, or John Candy and in Vacation, or just what's our second movie? The
Ferris Bueller.
Ferris Bueller.
Oh, wait, yeah, she was the secretary was in. That's it. That is it. You nailed it.
That's
Shell.
it.
The secretary was oh my God, we got one. Well,
you got one. You got it.
I got her. Oh, that's perfect.
You got it.
Tell me if this isn't right though too. When you first did, because I would think that Parenthood would have had a lot of scenes in it that would have been unscripted because of, and you talked about the dog scene being unscripted and it was improvised, but also in the Dankeschön scene in Ferris Bueller was also an improvised scene. They had pulled all those people and a lot of the construction workers and things, they were genuinely just filming them. And then I thought, well, maybe Parenthood also had some unscripted stuff because it was a movie with kids.
No, you nailed it. Look, this is a Thanksgiving episode. It's a Thanksgiving special. And the greatest Thanksgiving movie of all time is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And yes, John Candy, Edie McClurg, who played Grace in Ferris Bueller and played at the famous car rental scene, which one of you brought up earlier. And I was thinking, you're going to start piecing this together. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Steve Martin. So Del Griffith and Neil Page. Neil Page by Steve Martin, Del Griffith with John Candy, and Edie McClurg playing the car rental, which is just such a small role. Again, we talked about how she could take over a scene, and no matter how small her role was. So those are 3. And I wore the shirt just to kind of like
bring it together,
tease it a little bit.
Dude, that was I am so emotional about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I forced my kids to watch it. It is Thanksgiving. It's funny. It's got lines that I'll remember forever. It has just huge, tiny scenes. It's Del Griffith on, when Steve Martin, when Neil Page pieces together himself at the end, what's really going on with Del, and brings this guy that he's wanted to do nothing but separate with since the beginning of the movie. And then he brings him home for Thanksgiving. I mean, the movie is iconically Thanksgiving for me. It is Macy's Day Parade Thanksgiving for me, and the fact that you made that the connection for the Thanksgiving episode, I could not be more grateful. I love this.
Absolutely amazing.
Awesome. I mean, I love the movie, and I'm so glad you guys got it figured out. I mean, Shell, you started I was like, I wonder if this second one is going to be the one, because you had touched on a couple of those things as well. I think it's, I love John Hughes, and he was so prolific in the 80s. And we were talking, Shell and I, beforehand about the movies that he touched in the 80s. I mean, from Vacation to 16 Candles, Weird Science, Ferris Bueller, The Breakfast Club, Some Kind of Wonderful, Pretty in Pink, Planes, Trains, Automobiles, Home Alone. I mean, the list goes on. And this was the movie for me, out of all of them, that stands out because it's an important movie. It's about humanity. And it's how sometimes what we need to do is see somebody else in a situation where they're struggling and they need help, in order for us to realize, in Neil Page's experience, that our life is pretty good and we have our ups and downs and we have things that are going on, but there's always somebody that could use some help. And like he said, he connects the dots at the end. And I think that, first of all, there's a song, and I'm a big music guys, by a group called Book of Love. And it's a song that's playing at the very end when he's on the train tracks and he's standing there alone. And it's called, I can never pronounce it. It's Modiglinia. Lost in Your Eyes, if you want to look that up, and you'll know it right away. John Hughes was great with his music. But it's the end. It's the last line, the last two lines that are delivered. Hello, Mrs. Page. Hello, Mr. Griffith. And it's just perfect. It gives me chills because I can see her at the top of the stairs and I can see him, John Candy, with that nervous smile, just that very affable face and the nervous smile that he has, that somebody's actually going to care for him on the holiday. And it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I care for you guys, by the way. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, by the way.
Oh.
This is a wonderful gift to have for Thanksgiving, actually. Thankful for family, whether it's a created family or your actual blood family. Thankful that we're sitting here today doing this together as friends.
And, you said earlier about Ferris dedicating his day to Cameron. The flip side of that is, I love that you put those two movies together, because the flip side of Ferris Bueller's Day Off is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. One is the protagonist dedicating his entire day willingly to make someone's day better, and the other is doing everything he possibly can to get away from the other guy. And in the end, they both end up in the same place, in that the person finds what they need. Cameron needs to be left alone. Cameron needs to deal with his dad on his own and to finally say, hey, Dad, you got to deal with me because you can't just ignore me anymore. And John Candy's character gets the exact opposite. He's taken from being alone and brought into a family. And these unintended connections, sometimes these unintended stories that come out of our topics, I think are my favorite part of this.
Yeah, even just the little things like the roller coaster. You can always make at least two connections. Every time I've talked to you guys, there's always at least two connections. I can sometimes not get the third one, but there's still even underlying, just like John, when you said about the backstories of all the characters in Ferris Bueller, that's kind of like what happens here when we have these conversations too. There's depth to them because we are talking about things. And there's backstory to it. There's two connections over here and one more connection over there. And that's what makes us wonderful.
Yeah, and then John almost fell over. And if you're watching, if you're not watching, John almost fell out of his chair.
Four on the floor. On the floor, Mr. Kadrides.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I listen, I really can't get enough of the movie, and I do think that it's an important one for people to watch with their families around the holidays. It came out November 25th, 1987. So it will be 36 years this year that movie came out.
Crazy.
And it's still relevant.
I'm going to buy that.
And we're still in our late 30s, so I don't know how the math works.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're still.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I'm 37. So I'm 37. Yeah. So but I got to say, like, before we kind of wrap up here, because when I talked about how that movie had a heart, and I'm a huge Adam Sandler fan with his movies having a heart, and John Hughes was very good at like just fun comedy and also a little cynicism with teenagers. And then he comes along with this wraps this movie up in this incredible heart with this bow. And there's that really incredible scene where I think I felt like there was some real John Candy coming out in Del Griffith. And it was when Steve Martin, Neil Page, loses his ever-loving mind when they're in the hotel room. And he's like, you're like a chatty Cathy doll, except you pull the string. And it's a really poignant moment because it's when, Del says, you can make fun of me. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but, and that's okay. And, if that's what makes you happy, but I like me. My wife likes me. Meanwhile, we find out later that his wife has passed away, but he's like, I like me. My wife likes me. My customers like me because I'm the real deal. What you see is what you get. And I don't know, that scene for me I feel like that 2 minutes was Steve Martin and John Candy's best 2 minutes in their acting histories. And maybe they would disagree. Steve Martin might say, how dare you? But I do believe, I just feel that scene.
One of my favorite scenes. The whole movie. I'd have a hard time parsing out any one scene. That, the rental car scene, but the chatty Cathy scene, I've used that line on people.
Any last words, Shell, on the segment today? Congratulations on being the first to actually nail one of these ThreeView Mirror podcast episodes.
About time. One for the co-hosts.
Wait, that is, I'm honored. I'm proud. I swear to you, next time when it's my turn, I'm not going to make it so hard on you. I'm going to keep my little cliff notes like Chris does, and John can take his notes. But no, this was an amazing podcast episode. It was great for the holidays. We wrapped it up and I love the little bit of sentiment we've brought into this one too. The sentiment, like John said, we're looking backwards, but we're looking forwards, and we're here today. And today is a wonderful day. And I'm so glad I got to spend it with you too.
Won't you be my neighbor?
Yeah.
It's all been said. I just want to take this opportunity because this episode will be coming out Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That's next Wednesday. That's Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So from all of us here, I wish to all of our listeners, both of you, hopefully there's more than a couple at this point, but we are thankful for each and every one of you, each of you, both of you, and just thank you. I mean, all of us have been blessed to find this second half that I don't think any of us saw coming, and whatever it turns into, I'm just very, very thankful. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. This is me saying stay rad. I'm going to ruin Chris's accent. Be cool. Take care. Love you all.
I got a better one anyway.
I know what you're going with.
I'm going to go with turkey for me, turkey for you. Let's eat turkey in a big brown shoe. Make sure you eat some turkey out of a big brown shoe tomorrow in honor of Adam Sandler.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Stay well. You're still here? It's over. Go home.